Alrighty, hi everyone. Welcome to 2025, the first film program of 2025. Where we look over the past year in cinema. So last year we obviously had a lot of our work cut out for us because we had two big events in the film world. One was Barbenheimer, which was kind of the cinemas are back. Finally, we had Barbie and we had Oppenheimer come out. Everyone loved them both for different reasons. And then we also had the strikes, which for the first time since the 60s, we had the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild on strike at the same time, at least for a small amount of time. This year, I was almost wondering, like, what is there? But we kind of cobbled enough together, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite independent films of the year. Ellie, did you get around to seeing Hundreds of Beavers?
I did. I liked it a
Oh,
lot.
all right, we will get to that. But we are going to get started with 2024, the cinematic year in review. Ba-bum.
Do we count like Glicked as a Barbenheimer type thing?
Oh, yep, kind of. Well, kind of. We'll get to that. Tried to be wicked. It's tried to be wicked, and then tried to be Barbenheimer. Not quite. All right. Share. So I'm on a new computer, and I'm just like, oh, how does technology work? I
Oddly, it
finally know
doesn't.
how my parents. I finally know how my parents feel. Alrighty.
It's
So 2024, the
complicated.
year in cinema. So I always like to start off by looking at the box office for the year. So we have domestic box office. Shocking no one, Inside Out 2 came out, although I did not see it. Because I did not want to see anxiety portrayed as a cute character. I'm like, well, no, this is a thing that wrecks my day and makes me not sleep. It's not cute. I hate it. Um, Deadpool and Wolverine is next, which is for domestic gross. I believe this is now a record for the highest grossing R-rated film of all time, at least domestically. If we're
Mhm.
talking worldwide, I think Oppenheimer's still the one to beat. Number three is Wicked Part One, which I checked the box office. Wicked is still in, I believe it's still in the top five, or it may have finally fallen to six. Wicked has had an amazing run. Moana 2, Despicable Me 4, Beetlejuice, Dune Part 2. We had Twisters, the only, I would say, technical non-sequel. I mean, Ellie, did you see Twisters?
No. All of
Yeah,
those
it's
are sequels, though. I refuse to give Twisters
yeah.
the benefit of the doubt on that.
It's one where it's like there's no connection to the first movie at all. So I'm like, you could almost call it that. You got Godzilla Kong, Kung Fu Panda 4. So if you were to look at the domestic box office, you'd say, woof, cinema looks pretty bleak. It's nothing but sequels and franchise movies. And yeah, that's not great. If you've looked at the box office for the past like decade or so, franchises have truly taken over. But as we're going to get to later in this program, we are still seeing good box office performance for smaller films, movies for adults, and there are some indie breakthroughs happening. Now, just a quick contrast with the global box office. So we have the top two are the same. Inside Out 2, 1.6 billion. Actually, no, yeah, I think Deadpool and Wolverine may have just edged out Oppenheimer. I have to compare for last year. Deadpool and Wolverine follows up with that. Then we have Despicable Me 4, Moana 2, Dune Part 2. I find it very interesting that Dune Part 2 makes a respectable amount of money in the United States, makes way more overseas.
I'm sorry. Venom: The Last Dance? What country loves
That's
that movie?
I think there are a lot of, well, you also have to keep in mind in certain countries they don't get all of the American movies, so sometimes there's just like oh, I'm seeing an American film, I want to see it. I remember this is over 20 years ago at this point when I went to China. The kids there were really psyched that they were getting the movie SWAT. But for them, they only at that time China only allowed for a certain amount of American films to be distributed within the country. So
SWAT.
whenever one of them came, it was a big event. So for them, they were just like, and of course I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw SWAT and it's terrible, but I did not tell them that. But I think that might explain the love for Venom: The Last Dance. I mean, I think that's what's keeping the lights on for that series for Sony. And I was actually kind of shocked that Beetlejuice got into the top 10. I thought that was a fairly only known in the United States property. Did not think that would make much of a splash overseas, but I am proven wrong. And I am not shocked Godzilla and Kong continues to make money. Godzilla is still the longest running film franchise in cinema history. We also had the hype of Godzilla Minus One late in 2023 and into 2024, which, by the way, Todd finally showed me Godzilla Minus One. The hype is real. That movie is good. So we had that. Of course, I'm looking at this. I think the only movies of ours that are going to be on our top 10 are probably Wicked and Dune. Everything else, we're like, it's fine. Even though, like, hey, I saw Twisters. I thought it was fine. I know a couple
Good
people who saw
popcorn. That's about it.
Beetlejuice and said it was fun. Same with Godzilla versus Kong.
I did not like
But you know,
Godzilla X Kong very much, although I do congratulate them on creating a baby version of their big monster more off-putting than Manila.
wait, what? I
I
hate
think I know
Manila.
what
You're
she's
telling
talking
me there's a
about.
Manila
It's
in this?
No, there's a baby Kong who's just like the worst.
Okay. Because Todd showed me, I forget what movie it was, but it had Minzilla in
I
it.
think that was Destroy All
Yeah,
Monsters.
and I
Hmm.
was like, I looked at this little creature for 2 seconds, and I'm like, I hate this guy. Get him off my screen. But yeah, it is. I kind of feel like even though yes, Deadpool and Wolverine is rated R, I think the more depressing thing I see looking at this is like, arguably Dune Part Two is the only movie that's really made more for adults. Maybe Wicked
Wicked.
that managed to crack the top 10.
I like Wicked a lot, but Wicked is for teenagers. Wicked is for theater kids.
Okay, ouch, but true. But yeah, Dune Part Two is the only one I think you could really feasibly say is for adults and trying to tackle, I think, something larger, although Wicked does as well. Um, and it is interesting, like I've been going back and seeing box office for like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. If we're looking, I remember looking at the box office for 2023. Um, and granted, hey, Oppenheimer was the number two, like the number two film of that year, but
Mhm.
40 years prior in 1983, the number one movie of the year was Return of the Jedi, shocking no one. The second highest grossing film of that year was Terms of Endearment, which is a mother-daughter drama. And I just don't, I can't see in any foreseeable future a world where a movie like that is going to be the second highest grossing film of the entire year. And some of that has to do with who movies are marketed to now, what gets made. The studios are way more risk averse than I think they've been in a really long time. And that's why we're seeing this reliance on sequels and reboots and remakes because they just go, hey, IP makes money. We're just going to make more IP. But as I've said before, we do have, I think, some bright spots that we are going to highlight later in the program.
And of
But
course, they're going to be working on a sequel to the highest grossing movie of 1987 domestic box office and perennial Criterion Collection classic, Three Men and Baby.
all right, well, we are going to move on. Speaking of Wicked, so there was an attempt to have a Barbenheimer 2. So if anyone who came to my program last year, we talked about Barbenheimer. Barbenheimer kind of came about organically via the online sphere, which I've been trying to get out of a little more, but it was more, there was initially, it was seen, oh, Barbie and Oppenheimer releasing on the same day. The trades tried to go, it's Barbie versus Oppenheimer. And then you had a lot of movie fans saying, why not both? I want to see both of these movies. It's Barbenheimer time, baby. So this was, I don't know if it was studios or people online. They tried to merge Gladiator 2 and Wicked Part 1 into Glicked. However, it just got swallowed up into Wicked being the big thing. Because Wicked was, despite Moana 2 making a ton of money and even more money than Wicked, I believe it was, I don't feel Moana 2 had the cultural footprint that Wicked did. Like Wicked, I think became in a way sort of the film of the year
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the one that's had the most cultural impact. And also, I mean, the press tour for Wicked and the advertising game for Wicked, they took a cue from Barbie. as in have this everywhere, have the advertisements everywhere, have the branding everywhere. And I mean, it's understandable. They spent enough money on this movie. Of course, you want to have it anywhere. But Wicked became inescapable. And this is also compounded with the fact of Wicked has been a beloved Broadway musical for 20 years, over 20 years at this point. They've been trying to make a movie since before the musical came out. When the book came out, people were talking about, let's make this a film.
Mm-hmm.
So there was hype for Wicked versus Gladiator 2. There was not as much hype for, and if anything, there was more of a question of why? Isn't Russell Crowe dead at the end of that movie? How are we making a sequel to Gladiator? So Gladiator 2 ends up making, a respectable amount of money, and it hung into the top 10 for a while. Into the top 10 for a while. And again, there's movies for adults. I joked, I'm like, well, my mom and my brother and I are gonna go see Wicked. My dad might go see Gladiator Part 2. Um, Wicked was the one that had more of the staying power and definitely looks to be more of an awards contender this year. I think Gladiator 2 might get some technicals and that's it. Ellie, it took you, so I saw Wicked like 5 days after it opened, and Todd was just kind of like, all right, I'll be on standby if this is terrible for you to just vent.
Yeah, like I was
Um,
really prepared for it was a if the call is good, good. If the movie's bad, oh, that's gonna be a fun call regardless.
I haven't been this angry at a musical adaptation since I saw Tom Hooper destroy Les Mis. But I left and I was like, dang, this movie's good. Also, sorry, Dune Part 2, you are not getting a costume award this year. It's going to Wicked.
I mean,
Uh,
I held off on seeing Wicked for quite a while because my boyfriend wanted to see it with me, and also because like you mentioned the big advertising campaign, the shuttle between Times Square and Grand Central, which I take every day to get to work,
mhm.
entirely covered in in advertising. Like not like there's Wicked posters in there, like it's just covered. The entire train is covered. So like I was a little resistant. They hired the pop star. They cut the movie in half. I don't really like John Chu as a director. I hated In the Heights. Uh, Man, it's good. It's really good.
It really is. It's like I am with you. Like I went in with a very very apprehensive of like, all right, let's give this a chance. At least the reviews being good kind of made me feel a little bit better. But I was
Hmm.
still going in there like, all right, let's see. And I was the same way. I'm like, man, there's so many ways this should have failed and it didn't. And I think what's sad though is Hollywood is once again going to take all the wrong lessons from it because I
Who's
mean,
excited?
I don't dislike John Chu. I didn't really like In the Heights, but one of the things I noticed about it was this is a guy who's not afraid to make a musical, and he knows how to direct a musical number.
Who's excited
So
for Hamilton Part One coming out in 2026?
Don't you put that
please
evil
don't.
out there, Ellie. Don't you do it!
Yeah, it's but yeah, I was the same way. I'm like, let's see how this is, and I the same way. I'm like, oh my god, it's good. I need to see this again now. But I feel like Hollywood is once again like when Barbie made money, their first thing was let's make more toy movies instead of no, let's make movies that are good, aimed at women, maybe. I think instead of them going, all right, if we're going to adapt musicals, let's get people who understand how musicals work and let them direct the film. They're just going to say, we're going to split every musical into two parts now because Hollywood, especially in this day and age, is a master at taking wrong lessons from things.
I will also say, and this comment is more for Todd and Liz than for the audience because I feel like the audience isn't gonna understand what I'm saying here. One thing I discovered coming out of that, like the most formative ship for me is always gonna be Mulder and Scully. Man, Gelfie is really close second.
Oh no. Well,
I
I mean,
remember
I've made a joke a lot of times where I'm like, most of my favorite ships are one where at least half of that ship is dead by the end of that movie. So I don't know what that says about me.
Oh God,
Uh,
I'm back in high school.
when you when you brought me to see the movie, I just remember getting to that one scene and go like, okay, now I see it.
Yeah, you see it. You see it. He sees it.
yep. Oh yeah, no, there's that. But I mean, this did get me to start going back down the Alphaba and Fiera rabbit hole of fan fiction again, and I'm like, oh
Oh,
God, it's like I'm in college. What am I doing?
what are you doing? What are we doing here?
Look, at least Ellie, at least I'm on AO3 now and not on fanfiction.net.
I turned 35 in 2 weeks. What am I doing, Liz?
Well, Alrighty, we're gonna get to Wicked is one of the biggest hits of the year, but we're gonna get to one of the big indie hits of the year, a movie I have been talking about since March. And the Derry Public Library will soon have a copy of this because I purchased a copy, not just for myself, but to donate to the library because everyone needs to see Hundreds of Beavers.
Hundreds of
This is
Beavers.
this was a film I saw that Red River, which is our local independent theater in New Hampshire. They're up in Concord. If no one isn't familiar with them, but Todd and I name check them a lot.
Mhm.
I saw they're getting this movie, and I'm like, what is this? And I saw the trailer, and I'm like, this looks great. If you're unsure of what this is or you haven't heard of it, this film, it's an homage to silent comedies, so the kind of Buster Keaton style slapstick. It's an homage to Looney Tunes, Chuck Jones style stuff. You have a lot of these. There are moments in there where I'm like, that is a Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck style pratfall. It is about a fur trapper who needs to get enough beaver pelts to impress a lady who is the daughter of the guy who buys the beaver pelts. That's the story. Then he runs afoul of the beavers. It gets this film for what it was made for. It's number one. It's a labor. Sorry, post nasal drip from the weather outside is doing this. It is clearly a labor of love, but this is a passion project in a great way, where you could tell everyone making this movie believed in the vision, loved the vision, and wanted to make an homage to stuff they loved and grew up with. Years ago, when 80s All Over was still on, they talked about Indiana Jones and why Indiana Jones worked. And it's like, well, because Spielberg and Lucas took the stuff that they loved and decided to put their own spin on it. And that is why Hundreds of Beavers works. Because you can tell the people who made this are like, oh, I love the old Looney Tunes stuff. I like these old silent movies. What if we have our own style with this? And that's why it doesn't feel derivative. It feels so fresh. And I also think half the reason this comedy is gaining ground on like the independent circuit is because there are a lot of film goers who are kind of sick of the franchise fare, kind of sick of everything else, and seeing something that is different, that seems like a breath of fresh air, is really igniting a lot of passion in people. It is one of the best comedies I've seen in years. It's it. Here's the thing: I was skeptical of the runtime of this movie. I'm like, is it going to overstay its welcome? It doesn't. I think it does so well, and especially like the final act of the movie where it just careens into absurdity. It's great. There's no other comedy like it, and I am so glad this has become kind of the underground hit of the year. And when we get the copy at the Derry Public Library, I hope you guys check it out. It's so much fun. Or if you see that a theater near you is getting it, go see it. It is a lot of fun to experience in a theater.
You will know within the first 15 minutes if this is for you or not.
Mhm.
Hopefully it will be.
Honestly, I think by the trailer you can tell if you're gonna like this or not. I mean, I saw some people criticizing like, "Oh, it seems a little cheap." I'm like, the movie's made for $150,000. I'm sorry, it's not going to look like a Hollywood feature. And frankly, I've seen what Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania looked like. This
I mean,
looks better.
Also, that was going to be my point in response to that. Like, yeah, there's a lot of extremely cheap movies made in the last few years. There's this. There's We're All Going to the World's Fair. There's Skinamarink that are like famously, clearly working within very limited budgets, but have a unique visual style that I think matters more than having like expensive CGI that looks like plastic.
And honestly,
Yeah.
this is the kind of film where having a big budget polish, it would lose something if it had that.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely. And again, there's a reason I'm donating a copy to the library because I feel this is a movie that needs to be experienced. And it does seem like it's starting to become a new midnight hit. I haven't seen Coolidge do it yet, but I think Somerville Theater and Brattle are holding events and screenings for it. So if you do go down to Boston and you want to check this out, look and see if any theaters are showing it, because it is a great time and one of the most original comedies to come out in years. So as we kind of mentioned when we looked at the domestic box office and the global box office, this was a year where I felt more unusually overloaded with sequels than usual. Am I wrong, or
Probably coming off
like
the
I
writer's
looked
strike.
at the list and I'm like, my goodness, there's a lot here.
It's almost certainly coming off the writers' strike. Original movies
Mhm.
weren't getting written, so they were just working off scripts that they already had, which are usually scripts for sequels that they had lying around that they optioned 5 years ago or
Mhm.
whatever.
I mean, it's to be fair, some of these had been in the can for a while. Like Miller had been trying to get Furiosa off the ground for years.
Here's a fun one.
Nice.
You have Moana 2 on here. I know for a fact that that movie started as a Disney Plus Moana series, but then they've been really disappointed on the return on investment on streaming services. So they're like, cut it down to a movie and throw it into theaters. So
The old MST3K movie method.
exactly.
Yeah. But we had that, and a lot of legacy sequels came out this year. Furiosa was 9 years later. We also had Beetlejuice, which is 30 something years later. And from everything I've heard, to give that movie credit, they're like, it's not the best movie ever. But from what I heard a lot of people say, it's better than it really has any right to be. You could tell that some effort was put into this film. And I'm like, well, that's good. That makes me feel a little better about that.
Having heard about some of the earlier failed attempts at a Beetlejuice sequel, it feels like comparatively, this would almost have to be better.
Yeah, and we had the Joker Folie à Deux, which is one of the, well, it got a reputation as a bomb, not quite. Global box office kind of helped it make up more, but we also had Kung Fu Panda 4, which I don't even know when Kung Fu Panda 3 came out. Those Minions Despicable Me movies, they just keep cranking them out. But
They keep
we
making
also,
tons of money.
they do. Kids love them. I am not a child, therefore they do not speak to me. But if it keeps your kid quiet for 90 minutes, I can't judge you if you take your kid to see it.
You also didn't include on this list, directed by the Oscar-winning director of Moonlight, Mufasa, a Lion King story.
Oh, that's right. I was about to say, I forgot about that. And I was about to say, I feel like everyone else has. And then I'm like, wait, no, it's making money. And
It's made
Sonic
like
3. That's, well, that's why I said, here are some of the sequels we had this year.
I know.
But we
I'm driving home your point.
But we also had, I think, some good sequels. Dune Part 2. I am not Todd, I think, is the resident Dune head here. I am just like, I appreciate these films as being good. But we had that, and that was pushed back from 2023, correct? That was initially
Yeah.
supposed to be a November release.
Mhm.
Because there was some back and forth over the reasons for that. Like there was some speculation the first kickback was Zaslav trying to call the writers bluff during the strike because that was when the first delay got announced. And then they kicked it back further until we finally got it this year.
Yeah. Which it became, I believe, like the first truly big hit of 2024.
It held the number one spot up until Inside Out 2 came out.
I
Okay,
mean,
well, there we go.
without wishing to spoil any of these movies, another element that I feel like is worth pointing out is that a lot of these movies, maybe more than you expect, Smile 2, Doom Part 2, Joker 2, Furiosa, they're all just huge downers.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. On one hand, I am. We'll get to this later. I think David Zaslav. I will blame him for a lot of things, but I think he really fumbled the release of Furiosa because I'm like, okay, when you put out Dune Part 2, you put out Dune Part 1 to get everyone hyped. You could have put out Fury Road. But
Hmm.
then, as much as I love Fury Road, I'm like, we're pretty much watching a woman have the worst life ever for 2.5 hours. So I can see why people don't want to watch that.
Imperator Furiosa and the No Good, Very Bad Day.
No good, very bad
Increasingly
life.
poor decisions of the warlords of
Although,
Mantis.
although you then go watch Fury Road again, and you're like, I have never been happier for a fictional character in my entire life.
Hmm.
So pays off. And that actually for me, I think those were the more interesting sequels, excluding Dune Part 2. But we also had like A Quiet Place Day One, which I'm not huge on those Quiet Place movies, but I thought it was compelling enough. Lupita Nyong'o's really good in it. I liked the setting to a city instead of a quiet rural farm. I'm like, okay, this adds a little bit more meat to this story. I know there's a lot of people that liked Alien Romulus. I'm just at the point of there's only one good Alien movie, and it came out in 1979, but people are allowed to like things.
No, they're not.
Ellie. But yeah, it's sequel heavy, and if we refer back to the domestic and the global box office, this is what makes money. So unfortunately, the studios are not going to stop manufacturing these, but I also tell people, well, and another good way to ensure that there's more than just sequels and remakes, because those are never going to go away. Make sure you see these smaller films and movies like Conclave, which we will get to. So, going off of that, we mentioned stuff like Joker Part 2 and Furiosa, the bombastic year we had. So last year, Disney did not have a good year, and just the superhero trend in general kind of petered out. I think it's very telling that only one superhero movie really came out this year, and that was Deadpool and Wolverine, which was in itself somewhat of a legacy sequel, slash the team up people have been waiting for years. That made a ton of money, but that's because there were no other superhero movies around and people didn't have the fatigue of superheroes. Or if they
Mhm.
were around, it was series on Disney Plus or The Boys, which is speaking of downers, man, The Boys season 4.
I mean, like the superheroes have been moving increasingly onto TV. You know, the Penguin was a huge hit by
Hmm.
streaming service. Harley Quinn is out, and the new season is out in a few days. So I don't know. I think that's a better. We'll see what happens with the new Superman movie.
Oh, I was wrong. I said there were no other superhero movies this year. I'm like, wait, there was Venom and there was Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web. This tells you how good those Sony movies are. I forgot about them and I don't consider them superhero films.
Hmm.
But
Totally taking a bath on anything that isn't animated.
they really are, though. You know what? These movies can exist as long as we get the Beyond the Spider-Verse. But we have Borderlands, which at the time was arguably the biggest bomb of the year. It cost 115 million, and this is just production cost. When you look at these, you also have to take into account marketing, which usually is not included in the production cost. Worldwide gross of 32 million. That's taking a bath on it. And that movie had like Kate Blanchett and Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't know what happened there
Well,
and
for
how they
Eli
got
starters,
talked
Roth.
into this.
Eli
wasn't that
Roth.
basically all kept on the shelf for years?
I think that was it because people were asking, what is Kate Blanchett doing? She's just coming off of Tar. Jamie Lee Curtis just won an Oscar. And then it turns out they may have made this film prior to all of that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that makes more sense. We had the Crow remake. The remake really nobody wanted. Estimated budget $50 million. Worldwide gross 24 million, less than half of its production budget. Um, Kraven the Hunter, 110 million. Worldwide gross not that bad. It's about half, and it's still somewhat. It's already out of the top 10 though, but it's still making some money. And then we will get to this in the next slide. Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, 120 million, most of it his own money. Worldwide gross $13 million. Ouch. And then there's some other movies that were written off as bombs because they didn't make a ton of money in the States, but between the global market and VOD, it actually helped them out a little more. So Madam Web, Furiosa, thank goodness people overseas respect George Miller because America doesn't.
Hmm.
And Joker Folie à Deux actually made a lot more money overseas than it did here. Um,
Did
although
France
I
like it?
do
I bet France liked it.
Well, again, I think some of this is just there are certain countries where, oh, it's an American movie, let's go. This is just what we're doing for the day. I still question how that film cost almost $200 million, even if we're taking into account Lady Gaga's salary. I feel like there is going to be an oral history about the failure of that film coming in the next 5 years. There's going to be some kind of an in-depth Vulture article about that because some of these films, especially when they've talked about the visual effects back to the Marvel films, people are starting to see we're looking at the budgets and we're looking at the finished product and wondering where is this all going. But since I mentioned Megalopolis, this is one of the things I believe the three of us have been very excited to talk about is Francis Ford Coppola's long-awaited question mark passion project Megalopolis. So what is Megalopolis about? Does anyone want to try to explain this? Because I still don't know if I understand it.
You ever seen the Fountain? You ever read the Fountainhead?
I've tried.
That's about it.
I
You're
mean,
eighty
it feels
percent over
Okay.
there.
I mean, that's actually one of those points that kept coming back to is like, this feels like Coppola is trying to make the Fountainhead while not engaging with Ayn Rand's more questionable philosophical choices. And as a result, I feel like, and it's the phrase I'm probably going to repeat later in this program, this is a movie that I feel can be best summed up in in the famous words of David Byrne. You're talking a lot, but you're not saying anything.
I mean, I think you're right that it's trying to build itself off the fountainhead without engaging with Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy, which in my mind is a little like trying to engage with the Saw movies without wanting to worry about all those torture porn traps. Okay, but then what else is there? What are you here for? Go home. Go watch something else.
About
What's interesting about the film is I kind of caught this as well. I'm like, it does have very like Randian, and if you're not familiar with Ayn Rand or the Fountainhead is about a an architect who will not compromise on his work, wants to do things his own way. And you know what? There's a better movie about that came out this year. It's called The Brutalist. But you look at some of the things this film is saying or trying to say. At the end, there's this I pledge allegiance to the human race and trying to make a better world and make a utopia. And it's like these are two opposing ideas, and it's no wonder the film is a mess. And it's especially depressing because Francis Ford Coppola is one of those directors who came onto the new Hollywood scene in the 70s. I mean, he gave us The Godfather. Also, The Conversation is a fantastic film as well.
Rumblefish.
Um, what?
Rumblefish.
Oh,
I'm here
Rumblefish.
as I'm a Rumblefish stan.
and
Yeah, Rumblefish, The Outsiders.
for as troubled as production is, Apocalypse Now is still one hell of a movie.
Exactly. Like he is one of like the gods of the 19th cinema of the 1970s. But it seems like he had some trouble in the 80s, and once the 90s hit, it seemed like he really did not want to or was not able to really evolve with the times. Or he also, I think, bought into his own hype in a way some other directors, Scorsese, have not. So I don't know if there was no one here to not tell him no. I don't know if Sophia maybe tried to sit him down and said, Dad, you're going to need to hash this out a little more, and he just ignored her. But the hype around this film, or the mythology around this film at this point, because this has been something that he's been trying to make for decades, was he funded it himself. He sold his vineyard. It's his passion project. And when it comes out, the fact that it is so muddled, and not just muddled in terms of what it is trying to say, it also it's not well edited. It doesn't look good either. It's really poorly lit for a film that costs $120 million.
At this point, I think there's only one person whose motivation on this project makes any kind of sense to me. I feel like Adam Driver just saw this as, I can knock Coppola off my director's bingo card, because he is just racking them up left, right, and center these days.
I mean, he's trying. I think everyone here is trying. Thankfully, Aubrey Plaza understands that she is not in a good movie, and she plays it up really
And
well.
I think Adam Driver just wanted to get through with his performance each day and get back to the club.
I mean, the memes, you're correct. The memes that came out of this film were better than the film itself. And it was interesting to kind of see a lot of the film bros that, deify the 70s directors try to convince us, and I think partially themselves, that this movie is brilliant. And it's like, look, I wanted it to be better as well, but at the end of the day, it's just not great.
I think the most telling defense of it, such as it is, I had seen came from, it was the New York Times publication of like their 10 best of the year. And their right for the essentially came down to, okay, it's not a good movie, but it's a passion project. We're glad it exists, which is like, okay, I get it. You're in love with the idea of the movie, but the fact is, it's not a good movie. I'm sorry. There are other good passion projects being made this year.
Mhm. And here's the thing, I'm glad it exists as well. I'm glad it got made, but we also need to be able to go, it's not that great. I know I know Scorsese really loves The Irishman and wanted to make it. I think it's good, but I also think that Silence and Killers of the Flower Moon are better movies. I can hold these thoughts in my head at the same time.
I've come to the point as in my life where I have a friend who her favorite movie is not Alien 1, not Alien 2, not Alien 3, not Alien 4, not even Alien 5, but Alien 6.
Prometheus?
No, the one after that.
I was actually
Covenant?
pleased for you to say AVP Requiem.
No, that is her favorite movie. So at this point, I've just sort of gotten to the point where I'm like, gonna accept, okay, some people I'm just never gonna get. Some
Yeah.
people, I just don't understand their taste in movies. They probably don't understand mine. I really like Stalker. Leave me alone. Leave me to my
Yeah.
filth.
But Stalker is a good movie.
But yeah, no, this is it's a also there is some kind of grossness behind the scenes with Coppola being accused of getting a little too handsy with extras. And then the fact that he outright said he cast Shia LaBeouf, who has his own controversies. He cast it and just said, "Well, I wanted this movie to go against cancel culture." And there is a beat in this film that if you know taking that into account, and if you know some of the people Francis Ford Coppola has defended, it just comes across as a very
Skin
tasteless, and I will
crawling.
leave it there. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't want to bring this program down. But I would still recommend watching Megalopolis. It is a failure, but it is an interesting failure. And I will take an interesting failure over a boring bad movie any day. And again, we got Adam Driver saying go back to the club, and I'll take that.
And just whatever John Voight was doing.
Yeah, I don't know. Did John Voight know he was on screen?
There's a
So
possibility of
another,
elder abuse. Let's leave it at that.
yeah. So another trend that we kind of saw this year, and we've been seeing it for a few years, is queer stories are getting more prominence in the media. And unlike, let's say, like the late '90s and early aughts, and I would almost say into the 2010s, they're not just sad stories, and they're not stories like that are made for awards bait. I immediately think of Jared Leto's character in the Dallas Buyers Club, which is, I mean, that movie's 10 years old, and it seemed
Ugh.
dated when it came out.
Who's excited for me
Whereas,
to talk about the Danish Girl one day?
oh, there's,
Ooh.
yes. So we also have a lot more queer filmmakers who are getting to make their own films. So Luca Guadagnino, who had both Challengers and Queer this year. Um, we had Drive Away Dolls, which was, I did not know this, directed by a Coen brothers and written by his wife, but his wife is a lesbian and they've just been married for convenience for decades.
They got married in the 90s.
Yeah, well, hey, look at that. Um, but it's ones where in some cases the queerness isn't even the central point of the story. The movie I loved this year, Problemista, you're just like, you get a couple of hints. Oh, this character's gay. All right, moving on. That's not the main part of the story. Or you have something like Monkey Man, where the main story is Dev Patel telling the world how he feels about Modi. I mean, you can't watch that movie and not see that. But there's also a subplot with the Hijra, I hope I'm saying that correctly, who are a group of trans people in India being allies to his cause. Or National Anthem, which is again a movie we just watched last week, but a really nice independent film about this construction worker who gets a job on a queer ranch, and he just kind of falls in love with the people there, both romantically, and just makes friends and realizes these are cool people to hang with. So it's no longer awards bait, it's no longer tragedy, it's more we're just telling stories. And of course the two films that I have here are I Saw the TV Glow and Love Lies Bleeding, which we'll probably talk about more at length later. But this might be a good time to talk about I Saw the TV Glow versus Amelia Perez, which looks to be a big Academy darling. I Saw the TV Glows. Actually, Ellie, do you want to talk about I Saw the TV Glow? Because you were the one who got us to see it.
So I Saw the TV Glow is a movie. Uh, it is broadly speaking about about a character who finds out or thinks that he finds out that his life is kind of a lie. He's actually a person from a TV show he watched as a kid who needs to like escape his real world. Uh, it is metaphorically, and I say metaphorically, barely metaphorically, about being a closeted transgender person. And if you want to know how good it is at being about that, I'm transgender, in case that wasn't obvious. I've seen it 5 times. The first time I saw it, I actually had a date afterwards, and I had to run around Manhattan trying to find a Starbucks, the bathroom, because I had ruined my makeup, sobbing
Oh,
for the entire last half hour. It's an incredible movie. It's if you know a trans person, they will. I don't think I've ever seen it with a trans person, especially a trans woman who hasn't like broken down sobbing in the last half. It is and it's directed by a trans femme NB named Jane Schoenbrunn, who is someone who I've been following for years. Uh, Absolutely, it's my favorite movie of the year. It's my favorite movie of the decade. It's probably in my top 20 of all time at this point. I really can't recommend it enough. A lot of people are probably going to hate it. That's fine. You should see it anyway.
Well, and there was so when you took us to see it, it was at the Coolidge when they were honoring Jane Schoenbrunn, and they talked about the film. And one of the things that really struck out for me was they talked about horror and how horror influenced them. But they said the older I get, the more when I think about what's scary, it's not a monster, it's the idea of a wasted life. And when I
Hmm.
tell people about that, I'm like, just keep that in mind when you watch this film. But we also have this movie, Amelia Perez, which haven't seen yet. It's
Same
Netflix,
here.
so piracy has to be my option for that. But that is about and it does star a transgender actress, but it is centered or it is directed by a cisgender person, and there has been a lot of critique from a lot of transgender. I don't know if there's been filmmakers, but at the very least, critics. And yeah, even
The
I kind of look at that as I'm like, I feel we had a very personal story here, and the fact that that's not the one getting attention is still, it's still like, oh, we're still kind of in some of the older habits of Hollywood in terms of what gets paid attention to. Um,
I I don't know this for a fact off the top of my head, but I do think I do remember seeing something written about it by the director of another movie on the list, The People's Joker, which is I don't know if I can explain that movie quickly. Anyway, I think from what I understood, she hated it too, so take that.
yeah.
Mia Moore, who was a
Also,
filmmaker, hated it.
yeah, I do want to mention we put Wicked at the bottom. So if anyone is not familiar, you might go, "Well, Wicked's the movie about Wizard of Oz and the witches." Well, here's the thing with that musical, there have been people who've wondered if Galinda has a thing for Elphaba for decades at this point. And Ariana Grande pretty much confirmed, she's like, "Oh no, that informed my performance." So I'm like, "All right, that confirms it. Wicked, technically a queer film."
Hmm.
So also, since I am a horror fan, I had to give a shout out to horror this year. This was a very good year for horror. In particular, we had a couple of misfires. We had that imaginary movie, we had Night Swim, whatever. Those are horror movies that come out in January. They're never good anyway. But then Late Night with the Devil came out, and that movie, I think kind of truly kickstarted the year in horror. And it was the year where a lot of directors kind of came out and said, I'm going to experiment with the genre a bit. So we had Late Night with the Devil, which is supposed to be a throwback to the 70s. If anything, it's more of a throwback. I could see this being a satanic panic movie made in 1983. We had Cuckoo, which I've noticed a lot of critics didn't get, but I'm like, oh, there's a lot of throwbacks to Giallo, Italian and European horror films in this. Strange Darling, which kind of plays with the final girl genre. That was one where we watched way too late after the pencils down, and I think if I'd watched it beforehand, that may have made my honorable mentions because Strange Darling is fantastic. And then we had In a Violent Nature, which is essentially a Friday the 13th movie through the eyes of Jason Voorhees. It is one part that, and then it is one part a very chill nature documentary because you just see this guy lumbering through nice little fields as he goes to,
Murder people.
murder campers.
As long as we start to realize when he's not killing people, Jason's actually got a pretty nice life.
Yeah, I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, you live in the woods. That's nice. We also had Nunsploitation kind of come back with Immaculate in the First Omen. Unfortunately, that has not led to an official re-release of The Devils. We also had Smile 2 being a really big hit, and from everyone I have heard, way better than the first movie. I was incredibly underwhelmed with Smile, and I've had a couple people said, yeah, so was I. Smile 2 is great. And then, of course, in September, we had Coralie Forgeau's The Substance come out. And my God, it looks like at the very least a horror movie might get not the first horror movie since Get Out to be nominated for at least some larger awards. If this movie is not nominated for at the very least best makeup, best editing, best actress, and best director, I'm going to be mad. And I mean, it's already looking like Coralie Forgeau might be iced out from directing. And if she is, that is going to confirm that not only is the Academy still very iffy with women directing genre movies, it's going to be like, oh, you just hate horror. Like it, if you watch The Substance, you will see what I mean, even if it is not a movie for you. And so, kind of what I have been hinting at this year is the idea we're starting to see movies for adults start to make a comeback. They may not be on the top 10 list of the year. They may not be on the global domestic box office. They may not make $1 billion. Although last year we had Oppenheimer, which was a movie for adults. That made over $1 billion. But we're seeing these smaller movies that are made for like 5 to 20, $30 million come out and have a decent run at the box office. Conclave is probably the best example of that. I think that was a $20 million movie, and it hung in there for weeks at the box office, people just going to see it. People like my parents who they're like, oh, we don't see a lot of movies that are made for us come out anymore. Let's go see this. In fact, Challengers was the #1 movie at the box office when it opened in April. Granted, not a lot of competition, but still, that's a nice change from the consistent of it's either a franchise movie or a kids movie. And we also had movies like Thelma, We Live in Time, It Ends with Us, A Real Pain. Recently, right now, we're seeing Complete Unknown make a decent amount of money. So it seems like there's starting to be this coexistence again, like we had almost in the 90s of you could have the films for adults where you just want to watch people talk, but you can also have bigger budget films as well. And even the franchise movies, I point out Furious and Dune here, those movies, I would say they're aimed mostly at adults. Like teenagers could watch them and potentially understand that, but most of the themes and most of the content, I feel like you just have to be older to get those movies.
I feel like a lot of teenagers would go see Dune Part 2 and get to the end, which again is a huge downer. And not like Empire Strikes Back, oh, tune in next time, Space Cadets. More like a congrats, you won, and it sucks, and you hate it.
You
I
won,
just
not
wanted-
at what cost?
I feel like a lot of teenagers wouldn't enjoy that, wouldn't have fun with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think even the fact that we're starting to see just at the very least a few blockbusters become a little more adult oriented again. I'm like, all right. And again, you might see that I don't have Deadpool and Wolverine on here despite it being rated R, but I'm like, because that's not really a movie for adults. Like,
Deadpool
and
and
I say
Wolverine
this
is a movie for 14-year-olds.
Yeah. And I say this as someone who liked the first 2 Deadpool movies.
Me
And
too.
we also had, much to the chagrin of Gen Z, sex and sexuality are things we're starting to see in movies again. Love Lies Bleeding, Baby Girl, which, oh, I'll get to how much I hate that movie. Challengers, we have it in Queer. Sean Baker's Anora, my pick for best movie of the year, personally. But I'm hoping that the fact that we're seeing movies like this kind of have a foothold in the top 10 and also gaining a wider release movie. So, I mean, Ellie, you're close enough to New York. You get a lot of these movies anyway. But Todd and I, we live in New Hampshire. If we wanted to see Queer, we had to go down to Boston, but we did have Thelma, It Ends With Us, We Live in Time, A Real Pain, and Conclave and Baby Girl all open, and Challengers all open at our local theaters. And so I think the fact that these movies are not being relegated to just the New York and LA markets is a good sign overall, because it shows that studios realize, okay, maybe we don't have to just constantly cater to teenagers and early 20 somethings. Maybe 30 and 40-year-olds and older people would like to go to the movies as well. Because, I mean, as I said at the top, I'm getting tired of the franchise stuff too. Moving on. All right, we're doing our top 10 of 2024. Ellie, we're just doing it alphabetical by name, so you have your top 10.
So I will acknowledge a few things about my 10 through 8. Conclave is a movie about people in rooms making political talk. I'm a political scientist. The War of the Rohirrim is a movie about a warrior woman from Rohan. Famously, there's another one in the Lord of the Rings movies, Eowyn. I have a quote from her tattooed on my arm, so I'm really biased. Same thing, People's Joker, like. But I think all these movies are really good. I really liked Wicked and Dune more than I expected. Love Lies Bleeding is the sexiest movie I've seen in a very long time.
Agreed.
Kirsten Stewart and Katie O'Brien just have the best chemistry. I already talked about it. I saw the TV glow. Right now, Nosferatu is in theaters. Go see Nosferatu. I really liked it. Robert Eggers can do whatever the hell he wants.
Oh, yeah. Same with George Miller, because you put Furiosa on there.
I did. I love Furiosa. Like, I don't feel like I've mentioned most of these. Evil Does Not Exist is the real outlier here. I don't know, man. That movie just stuck in my head. Lisa Frankenstein is a movie that it's my honorable mention. I don't know. It really got to me. I really liked it. I thought it was hilarious.
So like I really liked that movie too. It's a cute little, I mean, it sounds strange to call a horror comedy cute, but it is. It's
It's cute.
cute. It's a horror romance, and we don't get a horror romance, or if we do, it's Nosferatu, and that's not cute.
The movie that people compared it a lot to, and I did made this comparison to, is Jennifer's Body, which is a kind of like comedy slasher movie from like
Hmm.
2009. And part of the problem was that critics didn't really like pick up what the movie was putting down. It took 10 years for that movie to get its critical reevaluation, get it on the ground floor before people were like, oh, I missed what that movie was saying in 10 years.
There is an editing choice, and it's also fun fact. This is directed by Zelda Williams, which is Robin Williams' daughter.
Hmm.
There is a an editing choice very early in the film where the stepsister of the main character is telling a story, and she's like, "Oh, well, I don't want to spread this to too many people." And each time it cuts back, there's more people she's talking to,
Very
and that
funny.
is a very smart and very funny editing choice.
Hmm. But that's it. Just all 10 of these movies are great. Go see them all. Don't blame me when you don't like half of them. My brain is cooked. Uh,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think my choices might be a little. Well, I will get to mine. So 10, Late Night with the Devil. This edged out Sing Sing by a hair, and I really did like Sing Sing. But Late Night with the Devil, again, I'm a horror girl at the end of the day. My bias will just creep in. But what I love about Late Night with the Devil is there is a very clear idea in here, and there's a very clear vision, and it is kind of a gimmick, but it sticks with it. And sticks the landing, in my opinion. I do think it's a shame there was controversy with using AI generated images. I don't think it ruins the movie for me, and hopefully the backlash, the people that made it won't do that again. AI art isn't real art, but it doesn't mar the film for me. Number 9 is The Wild Robot. I went in not knowing about this book, but I know a lot of people at my job really liked it. I did not expect to be sobbing almost incoherently while watching this movie. I did the thing which people who've been to movies with me know, where I'll kind of just be like, come on, tears go back into those ducts to no avail. Kneecap, great little movie that came out this year. I learned about this band earlier this year. They are an Irish rap group, and not just they are from Northern Ireland. They rap in Irish,
mhm.
and it's a very sensationalized biopic, but if I could steal something from Todd, he says it's really more of a mission statement than a real proper biopic. Nosferatu, as much as I am like, oh, remakes, if you can do a remake correctly and add your own thing, add your own spin, do it. And Nosferatu is a great example of that. Ghostlight, a film that likely will not get a physical release, which is a shame, but this is a beautiful little film. It is about a family that has suffered a tragedy. The father decides to join a local theater group and is able to not entirely heal, but process some of the tragedy that his family had been through. It's a beautiful film. I wish people would see it. And that's one where I wish the actors could be recognized more for like on the Academy. I know they won't, but it's a great watch. Hundreds of Beavers, as I've said, best comedy in years. Number 4, it's a tie between Love Lies Bleeding and I Saw the TV Glow. Two of the best queer visions we had this year. Love Lies Bleeding was also John Waters' favorite movie of this year. I have described it to people as it is the lesbian bodybuilder crime thriller you didn't know you needed. And I Saw the TV Glow is a beautiful film. And actually, Ellie, I would like to reference you wrote a piece on this film when you saw it.
I
And
did.
there was which is it is called Seeing Myself in the TV Glow if you would like to look for it. But there is a passage from that review that really sticks with me. And I Saw the TV Glow has stuck with me since I've seen it. I think it has one of my favorite scenes of the year is Bridget Lundy Payne's monologue. It is a
Hmm.
very simply set scene, but it's beautiful, and Bridget Lundy Payne is fantastic. Justice Smith, I have always liked as a presence, but this showed that he can, like, truly has what it takes as an actor here. His final scene is heartbreaking. But I do ultimately, when I think about this film, I think there is underneath everything, a message of hope. So this is from Ellie's piece, Seeing Myself in the TV Glow. Quote, I don't know Jane Schoenbrunn. I'm not privy to their writing process. But if I had to suggest the message we're supposed to take from the film, it's not the view of Owen carving open his chest to find the TV show he connected with inside. No, it's the final message from Maddie, someone who made it through, who is beautiful and powerful somewhere on the other side of a TV screen. It's not a line of dialogue, but a visual message, one she leaves in chalk on the street, so the camera can linger on it to give us a moment to absorb it. There is still time. And again, I this is why I tell people like you should see this movie. I mean, Roger Ebert always said films are empathy machines, and I think now is a great time to watch that film. Number three, Furiosa Mad Max Saga. I love George Miller. I think George Miller, I think it's him and Denis Villeneuve at this point, are the two directors who are able to make blockbusters that feel wholly their own and not
Mhm.
something made by committee. Um, also, I mean, I'll also say this. I was very skeptical when Fury Road came out. I'm like, what are we doing? Mad Max with a huge budget? I don't know. And of course, I came out going,
Yeah,
Fury Road
that's
is the
fair.
greatest movie I've ever seen. This movie rules. I'm going to see this 4 more times in the theater. And this is Furiosa both stands on its own as a movie, and then it enhances Fury Road. So it works in two ways. And as I've told people, I don't know, something about a woman surviving a horrible male-dominated society does kind of speak to me in a way. Don't know why. Also, no joke, Furiosa and Love Lies Bleeding have my two favorite love stories this year. And again, for one of them, it's like, man, Liz, what is it with you and couples where at least one of them doesn't make it to the end? I'm concerned. Number two, The Substance. This movie rules. It might be um just there's so much of what this movie is saying about aging and the quest for youth and self-loathing. Demi Moore gives a great performance of it. It's one of the best looking movies this year as well. Love Light. I saw the TV Glow looks beautiful too. But I don't want to spoil too much of the substance. All I will say is two words: the audacity. That third act is amazing. And number
Mhm.
one is Honora. I am a huge fan of Sean Baker. I have always just loved the how much he loves his characters and how much he understands people, and he has a humanity to his films that I feel a lot of filmmakers don't have. And he's able to have empathy for people whilst allowing them to not be perfect. Mickey Madison is fantastic as too. She's so great in this. She is my personal pick for Best Actress of the Year. I don't know if she's gonna get it, but it's wonderful. Honorable mentions. I love Sing Sing, Wicked Part One. I did not gel with Queer when I first saw it, but it stuck with me. So I'm like, all right. Problemista I really loved, and I love Maxine. I love that Ty West X trilogy. Um, and again, speaking of women surviving not great things, Maxine, she's my girl. All right, we're gonna move on to Todd.
So the blessing and curse of being in the last spot is there's a number of talking points that I've had that have already been kind of touched on, so I will just kind of keep this to the things which haven't already been addressed. So, going for the top, we have Wild Robot. Again, similar reasons. Nosferatu, just Robert Eggers can get away with cinematic murder at this point. This is now 3 for 3 on this film, having solid versions of a story being told, each having its own unique spin. Kneecap, again, this is the movie that if this movie exists in spite of the joke about how do you make a musical biopic after Walk Hard, because this goes, we don't just do the obvious beats.
Or you make him a monkey. Come on.
Yeah, that may be another we all could have brought up for box office bombs. We'll see how that shakes out. Honora, likewise, we didn't touch on this as much. One of the things that really strikes about this movie is part of it is a movie that's ultimately about the idea of the American dream as a fairy tale. It is
Mhm.
marketed as a fairy tale, and just very quickly you learn so much of what you're seeing. It is a fantasy that's not
Mhm.
going to hold up to the cold light of reality,
Yeah,
and that is a
it
part
is.
that is a point of the movie.
Actually, to just jump in on that point, we saw The Brutalist this past weekend, and while that is also a film that kind of touches on the reality of the American dream, I still think Honora does it better.
Fair. Love Lies Bleeding, again, just Rose Glass is a director to watch out for. She's
So
already
good.
2 for 2 on these very, very unique, very ambitious movies. Seek out Saint Maud as well. Just Be ready. That one's a ride.
Oh, same odd rules.
Yeah. Furiosa, again, we've pretty well touched on. George Miller's, I know that he can get away with murder at this point. The substance just, I think Liz pretty much said it all. The less you know going in, the better. Just let it wash over you like a blood red tide. I saw a TV Glow again. I think Ellie really put a lot of this best, but the one other thing I will add to it, and part of why it's placing this high for me, it is a very well made, very personal statement from the director. Plus, it's also a movie about the illusory nature of nostalgia, so that is like catnip for me.
Mm-hmm.
Dune Part 2, I'm going to make a callback to last year when we did, now 2 years back, we did our David Lynch program. One of the issues I had with his adaptation of this book is the fact that he makes the movie into a straight hero's narrative. I think it's very fitting that the first of the three adaptations we had, the one that freely embraces the fact that Paul Atreides is not meant to be seen as a big heroic figure, is also the first adaptation of Dune we have had in the aftermath of the War on Terror, and recognizing years of kind of arming and using religious groups for proxy wars may not have been the best idea. This is the first version that's really leaned into that aspect of the book, which was written in the 60s, and really the more it goes on in the later books, it's Frank Herbert going, you have opened a Pandora's box you cannot control. You are spreading horror across the universe with this. And I am now very intrigued to see what he does with Messiah when we get that, which is probably at least another 2 or 3 years out. Ghostlight, I'll admit, this is a bit of a personal bias because I kind of went through something like this a few years back. 2022 was a rough year with a lot of death, and likewise, I kind of rolled the dice on a community theater group. I found the film is not wrong. You can find a sort of community and healing in a group like that. It is worth putting yourself out there for.
Ghostlight, Drive My Car, movies about someone grieving where they work through it through community theater acting.
And honestly, it's all I will say besides that, if you can get a chance to see it, there is a scene, one of the more emotionally powerful scenes I saw in a film last year. It is literally just one man sitting in a hearing, kind of he's recounting what happened as this family loss goes. And as he is recounting it, he is kind of putting together pieces he did not have before, and just having this epiphany of, I finally understand what happened. I understand why this happened. And it's not like he's necessarily like, I am completely cured, I can move on. It's like he has that one of like, I am seeing this in a way I never did before, and now I really need to start re-examining a lot of this hurt I have been nursing. Honorable mentions again, Sing Sing. It's a very, very well made movie, great Coleman Domingo performance, and another about the idea of the healing power of art and performance. Late Night with the Devil, Liz kind of said it all. This is like, you know what, again, these other four, I'm going to agree with a lot of what was said before, and the only thing I'll say is, Queer may be, I think, the single best performance I have seen from Daniel Craig to date, and I think part of why it sticks out is this is a guy who built his career on playing James Bond, and here he is playing this very sad, awkward, lonely person who is desperately trying to get any sort of connection he can in the world, and he just can't seem to bridge it with people. And it is honestly, that's what makes that performance and work so well. He's a character you kind of feel awkward just watching him with people, and you want him to make that connection, but he can't seem to get out of his own way.
Okay, but question about Daniel Craig's performance in that movie. Does he do a comedy Southern accent?
Actually, no. It's like
1 star!
It's a pretty flat accent, but man, he nails it. It's a great performance.
No, it is, and although we'll get this to awards, but him and Coleman Domingo are my big picks for Best Actor. Although my actual pick is not going to be nominated. So now we're going to get to biggest disappointments. Speaking of that, what did I hate this year? So I was looking forward to Baby Girl. I liked the idea of Baby Girl. A movie I really love from the early aughts is Secretary. And I'm like, okay, are we going to get something similar to this? I was very okay with this story of a woman who, let's just say, finds a part of her awakened that was sleeping. And as watching this movie, I am realizing I hate everyone on screen. I don't have any connection to these people. I don't like these people. And you can have unlikable characters, but you need to make them compelling. The two leads in this movie are not compelling, and there's no chemistry between them. Again, we're going back. Love Lies Bleeding. The chemistry between Kirsten Stewart and Katie O'Brien, palpable. Or going back to Furiosa, Anya Taylor-Joy has, oh god, I can't remember that guy's name, but the one good man in that story, she's got chemistry with him. Or, again, Nosferatu, Lily Rose Depp has chemistry with both Nicholas Hoult and the creepy Count Orlok. There
I
is
will.
negative chemistry in Baby Girl.
One of
Negative.
one of my favorite chemistry moments for Love Lies Bleeding is I saw the Katie O'Brien, who played one of the leads in Love Lies Bleeding. Her wife was on Twitter going like, "No, obviously I'm not jealous of her and Kirsten. It's called acting. You people are weird."
Yeah. But there is a funny story to go with my raging dislike of Baby Girl. So we went to Red River, and as we're about 3/4 the way through the film, the disc they have starts skipping, so they have to fix it. And while we're there, other people start to voice their dislike of this movie, and we eventually go, "All right, is anyone in this theater liking the film?" The 15 people there, no one likes it. So when the film comes back, we spend the final 25 minutes just roasting it. So you know what? Go to the cinema, everybody. Sometimes you can have an amazing experience with an audience. But I am shocked that this film is being considered sexy. I'm shocked it's being I'm also shocked it's considered feminist. I feel there's certain things I like that the film does. The character doesn't get punished, but I feel the entire middle half of this film is falling into these like almost Lifetime movie level tropes. I was very a lot of the acclaim baffled me. Todd, your pick for disappointment.
I mean, we already said a lot of what there was to say about Megalopolis. Like, I kind of went in wanting to give it the benefit of the doubt of like, I was hearing a lot of negative reviews. Like, maybe I'll find something here. I was just bewildered by this movie. Like, I am fascinated by all the ways it doesn't work. I mean, it is almost as seeing as believing. I think that's the nicest thing I can say for it, but it is. I feel like I could probably do a whole program just on breaking down the ways this movie didn't work for me. Not even as a hatred thing, just more of a what on earth did I watch?
I mean, Todd, we could do that in August.
It's called an autopsy.
You tempt me. You tempt me.
And now, Ellie, you picked Deadpool and Wolverine. Care to explain? Because this was a movie everyone was waiting for.
I mean, like, I like Deadpool 1 and 2. I don't know if that opinion's gonna hold up to rewatches now, but like, I don't know, man. It's lit and graded like pavement. All the fights are momentumless. The audio cues don't work, but all that I could get past all that. But man, it's just like boring. It's ugly to look at. It's not funny, and also just like there's a level where like part of what makes Deadpool work for me is that everybody hates Deadpool. That is the joke of Deadpool. Deadpool is an annoying ass that everyone in the movie hates, but he's also immortal, so they can't really do anything about it. Like,
Well,
and
except for Negasonic's girlfriend Kimiko, she likes him.
that's part of the joke. Like, Negasonic hates Deadpool the most, but her girlfriend loves him. That's great. That's comedy. Incidentally, they have about 5 seconds of screen time and maybe one line between them. But the actual problem that like made it the most disappointing, because like I want to say that I put this here because like I will take a movie that is unwatchably bad but interesting over a movie that's just like kind of boring. What really got me there and what really started to piss me off by the end of my first viewing is
we're at a library.
is look, you can make fun of Marvel movie cameo fests, or you can do completely unironic hero shots of Elektra from the Daredevil movies from 2002. You cannot do both. Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. It's just the disingenuous stuff is real. It really started to grate on me by the end of the movie, and I just did. And by the end, I was just like, get this out of here. Get me out of here. I'm gonna go home and watch something French to cleanse my brain.
All right, I think we're gonna move on. Ellie's getting upset. So awards contenders. I think right now like I think this is the stuff that's probably going to get the most nominations. I am kind of bracing myself for The Substance to get snubbed because the Academy in horror, I feel like they recognize horror once every 20, 25 years, and Get Out was only awarded, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. Um, but
Uh,
it looks like it might be a knockdown, drag out fight between Honora and The Brutalist, and I will just put my cards on the table. I liked The Brutalist. I'm Team Honora. I love Sean Baker. I've been a fan of him for 20 years. If this is the year he gets his flowers, I'm going to be overjoyed.
don't count. I mean, to be fair, I don't really know much about the Oscars. Um, no, nothing. Okay. Conclave. I would say don't count Conclave out. The Academy loves old white
Mhm.
dudes talking in rooms movies. It is a top tier old white dudes a talking in rooms movie.
I mean, if he has if that's one where Ray Fiennes may have the potential, he may be the spoiler for Best Actor from voters deciding it's his year.
Yeah, he hasn't won yet. He's been doing this for forever.
Yeah.
Uh,
It wouldn't be a bad win, although I would like to say my pick for Best Actor is Justice Smith from I Saw the TV Glow. I think in a more just world, he would be in contention. I think he's heartbreaking in that film. But unfortunately, that film as a whole kind of got drowned out. Other snubs I'm thinking are gonna. I mean, I said this before. If you were to ask me who should get the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, it is Ariana Grande. Because I was with you, I didn't think that was gonna work, and she demolished that role. Although here's the thing, Cynthia Erivo, she's not winning this year, but if she does not win for Wicked Part 2, that's where I'm going to be angry because that's where Elphaba's really going to have a lot more to work with. And
mhm,
I cannot wait to hear Cynthia sing No Good Deed. I'm just going to
mhm.
leave it there. I'll put my little theater kid back in the box. All right. So to wrap up, what are we looking forward to next year? For me, my number one pick, Mickey 17. David Zaslav pushed this back long enough. It's finally coming out. I just don't understand how you have Bong Joon-ho, who won who his movie won Best Picture. He won Best Director. A monumental win, being the first non-English speaking film to win Best Picture. And yet it took how many years? Like they pushed his movie. I get that it took him a long time to make it, but he pushed the movie back. And again, I blame David Zaslav for everything.
For
Everything going
everything.
wrong at Warner Brothers.
I'm extremely excited for Queens of the Dead. Speaking
Yeah.
of Katie O'Brien, I'll basically watch anything with her in it now.
Yeah, she
And
she should be up for Best Supporting Actress, honestly. That's a star-making turn right there.
and also, I'm sure we're all gonna say this. Frankenstein, Guillermo del Toro
Oh yeah.
Yep.
has never made a bad movie. Uh,
I will admit it's not on this list, but I am cautiously curious about Companion. I'll see what the word of mouth is on that one.
Yeah, I put this on here for me and me alone. I am so excited for Paddington in Peru. Those Paddington movies are so wholesome.
mhm.
They're so good, which is we were considering some of the one of the movies we kept boosting this entire program is Love Lies Bleeding.
I can contain multitudes. I can like Petite Maman and uh, and The Handmaiden at the same time. You don't know me.
But I do. All right, and with that, does anyone have any questions? I did want to give a shout out to the movie Thelma. Great June Squibb performance. Charming little film that came out this year, and would highly recommend seeing it if you have not already.
And in light of that screenshot, let me just say, R.I.P. Richard Roundtree. You went out on a high note.
Yeah, I love that that was his final role though. It's a lot of fun. Actually, another film we didn't really I wanted to highlight, but we didn't get to talk about. Great little movie that came out this year, Dee Dee. If you saw the film Eighth Grade, which is like an adolescent journey of an eighth grade girl, Dee Dee is similar, but for a boy. He's kind of growing up in that same kind of YouTube era. Great Joan Chen performance as well. Highly recommend it. I like to say this every year. every year is a good year for film. You just need to know where to look. And thankfully, it looks like a lot of studios are realizing it doesn't just have to be multiplex fare all the time, that there's room for a lot more variety. And I like that. I hope that that trend continues. And we see the return of movies like A Real Pain and Conclave getting a wider release than they may have. Because I'm still not over Women Talking not getting a wide release.
Yeah, it was a bummer. Do you mind if I do a
And it
plug for
was.
my pod real fast?
Of course you can, because I've been
Uh,
on it. Both of us have.
Yeah, so the punchline to me saying I don't know much about Oscars is that I have a podcast where we roll up a randomly chosen Oscar-winning movie every single episode and chat about it. Both Liz and Todd have been on it. It's called The Biggest Night in Podcasting. It's on both YouTube and Spotify.
I
We
think I
just
can blame you for making me watch Green Book.
I can made Todd watch Green Book.
I
We've
think you
got
might made up for it though.
we just dropped an episode on The Matrix. It was a really good episode. Check it out. That's my payment for the hours of hard work I put into this presentation.
Alrighty. So we are closing down, but I always like to say if you ever want to have more recommendations, you can come find me at the information desk. I will always be available to talk your ear off about film. And next month, I'll just give a quick rundown of some of our next couple of programs. February, we're going to be talking about Billy D. Williams, Lando Calrissian himself, even though I'm going to be talking about much more than that. March, we're going to be talking about Agnes Varda, who's probably your favorite filmmaker's favorite filmmaker. She's a dame of French cinema. Maybe dame isn't the right word, but she's a queen. And in speaking of Bong Joon-ho, in April, since Mickey 17 is coming out, I'm going to be looking at the films of Bong Joon-ho. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. And I hope you join me for those. And with that, I will bid you all a good night. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for coming out.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, have a good night.